Welcome back to On the Clock, our show about making the moments matter. I'm your host, Elisa Gums. Today, we're chatting about one of those things that seems universally difficult, and that's asking for help. Joining us is Dr. Tammy Wilborn, a licensed professional counselor, a mental health and wellness expert, and the author of the new book, Playing a New Game, A Black Woman's Guide to Being Well and Thriving in the Workplace. Dr. Wilborn, we're so excited to have you here on the Clock. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm
How are
good, thank
you?
you.
How are you?
Uh,
Well, I asked because that's one of the things, right, is we have to get in the habit of not just kind of cursory, just kind of going through the motions, but like,
right.
how are you,
And
right?
answering that question
So thank you.
honestly,
And answering
yes,
the
for
question
sure.
for sure.
You have 20 years of experience as a professional counselor. How did you first become passionate about this work of helping people heal?
It's such a good question. It's one of those things. I actually talk about this in the book where I said my career is a winding road, one of serendipity, one of calling, one of choice, and some other things. I think for me, it was one of those things that I realized very early on that I wanted to help people. What was interesting though is it did not start out as professional counseling. So initially it was, I want to help people as an attorney. And so my plan was that I was going to go to law school and I was going to help people and fight for justice. And then I took my um, first political science class, and you would have thought that somebody was running their fingernails across a chalkboard because I was like, this cannot be life, right? Like, sorry to my attorney sisters, nothing, it just wasn't for me. And decided to actually switch a major, took a psychology course, and eventually finished there. Got my first job as a counselor working in a domestic violence shelter with a bachelor's degree in psychology. We're not going to talk about the ethics of working as a counselor without having that background, but that was part of the plan, I think. And from there, I realized that helping people was really what I wanted to do. It was working as a counselor in a domestic violence shelter that really, I think, jump started this 20 plus year career as a counselor.
Your new book, Playing a New Game, comes out next week. Why did you choose to write a book specifically for Black women and specifically around work?
Oh gosh, yeah, absolutely. So this book actually started out, I always like to tell people this book started out as me search, right? It started out as a personal experience that I had as a senior leader, dealing with workplace discrimination and having to navigate the mental and physical health implications that came with that very difficult experience. It actually happened to be coinciding at a time where I was a doctoral student. And so it went from me search to research. I became interested in understanding, is this something that's just happening to me or is it happening to other Black women? And what I learned was that Black women in the workplace experiencing race and gender stereotypes is a chronic stressor, but one that it wasn't widely talked about in the literature. And so from the research, it informed my clinical practice. So, as a mental health practitioner at a private practice, and many of my clients were Black women who, even though they may not have come to counseling for work related stress, inevitably work was the issue of the day. It was the topic of the session. And so it became clear to me that this was something that was happening to Black women, not just me, but Black women collectively. But it was not something that was being addressed publicly. And I thought it was important to really expand the dialogue on Black women's experiences in the workplace as a wellness issue, right? We know that stereotypes have professional implications for us. We know that, right? We know that there's implications for discrimination. We know that there's implications for promotion. We know that. But what we knew less publicly is what happens to us mentally and physically when we have these workplace experiences that are stressful. And so this was an opportunity to really speak broadly and largely to an issue that's really prevalent in Black women's work
Yes,
experiences.
and with all the time that I spend immersed in Black women's issues and Black women's issues at work, I have really never seen this approach where you have literally connected our advancement in our careers to our overall well-being. Like, break down that connection for us, please.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when you just look at the title of the book, right? So the title of the book is Playing a New Game, A Black Woman's Guide to Being Well and Thriving in the Workplace. And so really why that title I think is significant to the question that you're asking, and even the purpose of the book is um, most of the career advice that myself and other Black women who over the years have been given is the tool of you got to play the game, right? For you to advance, for you to achieve, for you to be successful in the workplace, you have to play the game. You have to work twice as hard. You have to never let them see you sweat. The problem with that messaging, first of all, is that it's antiquated, right? That's an old messaging. That's first and foremost. But then, two, the messaging is injurious because nobody really knows what the game is. And so there's always this moving goalpost where you're trying to catch and chase after something that's really fleeting and elusive. And in doing so, there's a cost. Right. There's a cost to playing the game. There is a mental health cost. There is a physical health cost. And we know that from the data. And so part of why this book I think is an essential read is I'm not just talking anecdotally about implications of playing the game. I'm talking about what we know from health data that say when Black women internalize these types of messages about, the need to work hard or twice as hard, mentally we suffer, physically we suffer, and it's time for us to thrive. Right, that old messaging, it doesn't work in 2022. We need some new messaging, and that's what playing a new game hopes to do, is to bring a new
I love that.
message.
I just have to underscore, you said the message is injurious. Like, I want people
It
to
is
hear
injurious.
that. So let's get to asking for help. Where did we, as women and Black women especially, get this idea that we have to do everything ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, part of what is the purpose of the book, particularly in highlighting wellness, is to really punctuate the specific ways in which stereotypes, right, which stereotypes distort the lived reality of Black women. And so when we have stereotypes, the challenge there is that it really hinders people's ability to see us and see our humanity, and therefore how they treat us reflects that, right, inhumanity or that dehumanization. But that's not just the danger of how other people see us. It's also a danger when we see ourselves as, for example, the stereotype of strong Black woman, which suggests what we know from the clinical data and also just from data is when Black women internalize that message of strong Black women, we don't ask for help because we're supposed to be strong, right? We're supposed to just grin and bear it, play the game, work twice as hard, bury your face in the sand and just do what you need to do. But there's a problem with that. And the problem is that there's often this silent endurance where Black women are carrying the load, not only the workload, but the load of the community, the load of all of these other responsibilities that we are often given. And when we don't take a step back and realize, listen, I love the idea, and let me just say this. I'm gonna just go on and out myself here. I can appreciate the idea of Black girl magic. I understand the empowerment that comes with that. Here's the problem. I don't know about you, but there is nothing that I've accomplished that was a result of magic. You're laughing, but you know why you're
Yes,
laughing.
because there's a whole lot of hard
Why are
work
you
that went into
laughing?
everything.
There's a whole lot of hard work that went into everything, a whole lot of. And it's not that I don't get that Black Girl Magic is a notion of empowerment and encouragement, but when you're having stressful experiences at work, magic not gonna help you, right? Even thinking of yourself as magic is not gonna help you. And so what I'm really getting at is when we internalize certain messages that again are antiquated, they're old and injurious, and even some of the new ones like Black Girl Magic, it keeps us from seeking the support that we absolutely need and deserve, and that the evidence shows is a way of coping. The evidence supports help seeking. So it's a
Yes,
problem.
it is a problem. And how do we get rid of that problem? How do we get rid of the notion, for those of us who struggle just accepting that we sometimes need help, that we have to be strong Black women who handle it all ourselves? How do we get rid of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it absolutely first starts with the mindset. Black women are not super magical, super women, superheroes. We are women. We are human. We have limitations. And so I think the first place, and I talk about this in the book, it starts with your mindset. It starts with understanding that you can be strong, and then there are times where you can be weak and are weak and need help. And recognizing that help seeking is not something that speaks against your character. It's not something that makes you weak. We all need help, right? So, in the first place to start is checking the mindset of what you believe about yourself and thinking, I can't ask for help. There must be something wrong with me if I need help. We know that that's not true. One, right? Two, the other thing that I think is important for us to know is that help seeking, like most of the things I talk about in the book, is a
Mm.
skill. It is a skill that you can learn, right? And so if you can learn how to say yes and raise your hand to everything, you can also learn how to say no. You can also learn how to ask that. You are cracking up, but do you
I
understand where
do
I'm going with
understand where
that?
you're going with it, because people never talk about the fact that, it's like the whispers in our ears that say, always volunteer for this, always say yes for that, take on these extra things, show them that you can do
Put your hand, put your hand down. Sometimes I have to slap my own hand, right? Because inevitably, and again, that feeds into those stereotypes of we should be doing more, right? I can do it. I can. Just because you can does not mean that you
everything.
should. And I think that's the part that's really important. It's just because you can does not mean you should. So again, it starts with the mindset of realizing that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Uh, Struggling is not a badge of honor. And oftentimes we see that struggle, that silent endurance, as a badge of honor. It is a form of dishonor. You are dishonoring yourself when you believe that you have to struggle just because of who you are, in this case, as a Black woman. We're changing the game with that message. Secondly, it's a skill. And so, specifically in the book, I talk about how we can be clear about the types of support and help that we need, and how we can communicate that request or that need for help in a way that's effective. Because the last thing I'll say about that is, as it relates to skill, seeking help and seeking support is a form of communication. Oftentimes what I notice with Black women is we assume people see us struggling, or we assume that, right? It's like, well, you should just know. They might just know, but because you never say no, they assume you're good. They may see you, but just because they see you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they understand what's happening to you in you. And so being able to communicate effectively what you need, how you need it, is another aspect, I think, of us being clear about getting the help that we need. We got to know how to ask and who to ask it of, if that
It
makes
does, and we're going to
sense.
come back to that. But first, I want to talk about something else you just mentioned, which is the silently suffering, or, as you point out in the book, biting our tongues. And you
Yes.
show in the book that it is connected to actual health outcomes for us that are negative, like headaches and sleep deprivation and symptoms of depression. Talk about what it costs us to stay silent while we're suffering.
Absolutely. So there are specific health outcomes that have been associated with silent endurance, which is some of what you mentioned. I talk about in the book is biting your tongue. But one of the things that we know from the research, and one of the things that I know from my clinical work as a professional counselor, is that there are higher rates of depression associated with when we stay silent with our pain, right? Um, the challenge again with that is because we're not seeking the help that we need, that means that we are experiencing higher levels of stress. And here's the thing,
Yeah.
stress kills. And if it doesn't kill, it makes you sick. And so, if we are silently enduring and not seeking our help, and the help isn't just help from friends and family, I also talk about in the book seeking professional help, right? Seeking professional counseling. One of the things that I realize as a professional counselor and as a client who has been in counseling myself is that there is so much value in having a safe space where somebody can just see you, right? They could just see you. You don't have to perform. You don't have to wear the mask. You can just be seen for who you are and who you're not. And again, oftentimes when we are silently enduring and holding on to the things that are happening to us, people don't see us. They see what we
Right.
want them to see, but they don't see the pain
We're working so
beneath.
hard so that they don't
And
see it, and then we get mad that they don't see
we're
it.
working so hard. We are working so hard. Exactly. The other thing that goes along with that is that there are physical health implications. And so, stress, most times people think about stress as an emotional response. Stress is actually a physical health response, right? That comes with silent endurance, diabetes, hypertension, hair loss, weight gain, weight loss, sleep disruption. These are all associated with silent endurance and some of the other things that I'm talking about in the book. So, this is a real health crisis that we're talking about. And that was, again, one of the reasons why it was important for me to speak to our work experiences from the position of wellness, right? This isn't just workplace, this is also wellness.
And the opposite is true also. Not asking for help is bad for your health, and asking for help is good for your health. You show that research proves that getting help and even giving help helps Black women, particularly, cope with stress, right?
Yes, absolutely. That was one of the findings that I found in my own research. My doctoral research examined working class Black women's experiences with race and gender race and gender stereotypes in the workplace. And one of the forms of coping that was identified in that research was giving and receiving support as a form of coping was found to be one of the ways that these women were able to navigate what was happening at work. And again, not only did I see that in my research, but it is part of the literature in the existing literature that we know when we get help, we feel better, we do better, we are better.
So, how can we assess when we need help? I think a lot of us wait too long, and either stuff has already gone sideways
Hmm.
or we are already drowning by the time that we reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such an important question. Like, what are
Yeah.
those signs? You know, one of the things that I talk about is this idea that the body keeps the
Mhm.
score. Um, Oftentimes, our body is signaling to us when we need help before we even put a label to it, right? And so you might notice physical signs like anxiety as a cue that you need help. You might notice disruptions in your sleep, right? You might notice um, um, signs of worry. You know, you're worrying about something particularly, or the help might even be mental. It might be your mood has changed. You're more depressed than you typically. And let me clarify. There's a difference between sad and
Right.
depression. right? Sad is a typical feeling, just like happy, just like joy, just like some of these other things. But when it moves to the point where what you're dealing with is impairing your everyday function, right? When the thoughts that you're having, the feelings that you're having, even the physical symptoms that you're having are getting in the way of you functioning on a day-to-day basis, it might be a signal that you need help. And notice I said thoughts, feelings, and the physical implications, because sometimes the signs may come from one or all of those places. So it could be the thoughts that you're having, the worry or sadness or anxiety. It could be physical, right? It could be that headache that you can't seem to get rid of, could be a sign, right? Or even that cold that, well, we're in the space of COVID, so I don't know. But
Right.
before COVID, the sniffles that you had could be related to stress, right? So there's cognitive, emotional, and physical indicators for us to think, to consider, like maybe I should talk to somebody or get some help for this.
Is there a right way to ask for help or a wrong way to ask for help?
I think there's an effective way to ask for help. I think when we're thinking about, so in thinking about, and again, I really try to punctuate this in the book, is that the things that I talk about in the book are skills that you can be effective at and proficient in, right? And so, is there a way to effectively communicate that you need help? Absolutely, right? One of those ways is being clear. And, of course, I get into this in the book, but one measure of effective communication around the need for help is first and foremost being clear about what is the specific type of help that you need. What help do you need, right? What does that look like? Secondly, another, and I'll just leave it here. So what kind of help do you need, right? So being clear about the help that's needed. But then two, being clear about who is the best person and or entity to provide that help. Because running and taking your problems on a listening tour with your friends may not be the most effective mode of help, specifically if what you need is a specific solution, or you need to process something deeper, or you need a non-judgmental perspective. Taking your problems on the listening to with your friends is not going to accomplish that goal. But if the help that you need is, I'm dealing with a workplace situation that's stressful and I really need to know how to navigate that, talking to a professional counselor might be an avenue. Talking to a mentor might be an avenue. Does that make sense? So I think being clear about the type of help that's needed and who the most appropriate support is, or the most appropriate support is two modes of effective communication, I
Yeah, I'm
think.
so glad you mentioned the who because that was going to be my next question. We've talked about why you should ask for help, when you should ask for help, how you should ask for help. And the who is so important because you make a point in the book about the fact that not everyone in your circle is in your corner. So, how can we determine
Indeed.
who the right person is to go to?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm one of those people, it goes back to the goal, right? What are you trying to accomplish? I'll give this example. This is probably a bit more extreme, but this is one that I give in the book. And so when I was dealing with the situation that I had in the workplace, the one of workplace discrimination, um, I knew that it was not going to be helpful for me to go to HR because I was a leader in the company. And so I was aware and had been on the other side of how HR responded to employee complaints. And oftentimes the employee complaint was handled by HR as, how do we protect the company? Right? Not so much the employee, if you will. I mean, there was certainly a concern about the employee, but it was more so, how do we avoid liability? So and so. So I knew that I needed to seek a third party to support me in this experience of discrimination, which in this case was the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, because I was clear that the help that I needed, the support that I needed, and even the protection that I needed was not going to come from HR. But I knew that because I was clear about what I was trying to accomplish. And so, to your question, to make it more pointed, the who is based off of the why and the what, right? Why do you need this particular form of help? What type of support and help do you need is going to determine who, right? So if you need to vent, venting to a friend, the what is the vent, right? What I need to do, I need to vent. Okay, there's a particular friend I know I can vent with. If there is a matter, for example, and I'll pause here, I'll stop here. If there is an issue that is one of confidentiality and you don't want it to be on the traveling road, you know that there's likely certain people I can tell her because I already know she gonna tell him, her, and them. But I can tell this person because I know that they're gonna hold it in confidence. So again, the what and the why determines it. But also being clear about who is in your circle and how they hold various forms of information. If I think if that
Yes,
makes sense.
absolutely. There's certain people that you can't trust with everything, and you should think that
Yeah.
through before you share. I have one last question that I have to ask you, which is sometimes people reach out for help and they don't get the response they want, or they don't end up getting the help that they need. And it makes it that much harder to ask for help the next time. So, what should we do if we've mustered up all of our courage? We started practicing our new skill, we've asked for help, and we didn't get it.
Hmm. Keep asking. It sounds simple. Keep asking because oftentimes when we don't get the help that we need, particularly as Black women, rather than discerning that the reason for the lack of help is I asked the wrong person, or, perhaps that person was not, again, that person was not the right person to ask for help, or, perhaps, in other words, rather than exploring the reasons why we didn't get the help that could not be in our control, oftentimes we attribute that there must be something wrong with me, or maybe I just didn't
Mm.
deserve the help, right? Maybe I should just, again, silently endure or struggle with this thing, and it just is what it is. I want to push back on that. I want to push back first and foremost on the fact that you are absolutely worth the help you're seeking every day, all day. And so when you realize your worth in that particular way and that you deserve the help, then it allows you to persist past the no's. It allows you to persist past the, okay, well, not yet, or I can. You keep asking, particularly when you realize that you're worth the help that you're asking for. And again, it seems simple, but if in thinking about this book, I really try to get into the mindset, because what people don't realize is I sort of have this working theory. I don't even think I talk about this in the book, so this is
Ooh,
kind
this
of
the
like
inside scoop.
fresh, if you will. This is like some inside scoop. But I sort of have a theory about how we manifest and move in the world. And so the first place is we start with mindset. What you believe, what you think, what you value is first and foremost critical. One. Two, the second M, and it's actually like four or five M, so I'll do it real quick because I know we don't have time. But mindset is one, right? What you think and you believe and you value. So what you think about your worth as a Black woman is essential. One. Two, because it determines your motivation. What's motivation, Wilborn? Motivation is your why. Why you move is going to be determined based off of what you believe about yourself. That's mindset, right? So mindset, motivation. But here's three. Three is movement. So What I do is going to be based off of my why, which is my motivation, which is based off of what? My mindset, what I actually believe. This is a long answer to your question, but I hope it's making sense and I hope it's
Yes.
helpful. Because here's the fourth thing: you manifest mindset, motivation, movement leads to manifesting. You are able to manifest thriving when you first believe you're supposed to
Mm.
thrive. Your motivation is why thriving. I deserve to thrive. I'm worth thriving. I'm worth not playing the game, right? So what happens? Your movement starts to reflect that. In other words, how you act, when you could say yes, you learn to say no. You learn to set boundaries. You learn to keep asking for help when you get a no. You learn to go your butt to bed when you want to stay up 12 hours, right? You manifest it. Does
It
that
makes
make
so much
sense?
sense. Yes. This has been,
It's our time.
yes,
It's our
it
time to
is our
thrive.
time
It's
to
our
thrive.
time.
This has been so helpful. And I have to tell you, you have given me a new professional goal. I'm going to write it down somewhere that I'm going to become proficient in asking for help.
Yes.
Proficient.
Proficient. Yes,
Thank you
yes.
so much, Dr. Wilborn, for sharing the unique ways you're helping people make the most of the time we've been given, especially the time we spend at work. And thank you all for watching On the Clock. We'll see you next time as we continue to talk about working with purpose and living with passion.